Hello and welcome to the Vagabond Way podcast. The journey goes ever on with the long road. This episode, it's time for an intervention. The Bishop, that's me, I staged an intervention this week. Dangerous levels of musical instrument addiction, not yet recognised by the WHO, but the struggle is real, feature in the long road. We take a slightly different route this week, talking shop about all things instrument. Kev takes us to a record store out in the beautiful English countryside, and Steve Bonham declares something's got to change. The Vagabond Way podcast, featuring the long road, is exploring the world of the troubadour, the adventurer, the vagabond. The world isn't beige, it isn't processed, it's authentic, it's rich, and it's real. And if those are the sorts of sentiments that make your brain light up, then hop on board. We are embracing all of those things, we're celebrating all of that, and we'd love it if you joined us on the journey. Greetings, I am Chris the Bish Leiden. Somehow it's the middle of September and we're on to episode 36. Thanks for sticking with us if you've been with us for a while, and welcome if you're just joining us this week for the first time. A few quick reminders, parish notices if you like. Huge thanks to everybody for supporting our latest single release. It's called On a Bridge Across the River. Loads of positive feedback, and so please do keep on playing it on Spotify and Apple Music, etc. If you feel so inclined, maybe even splash out the 79p on iTunes to buy it. And don't forget there's a YouTube video as well, so On a Bridge Across the River, do check it out. Don't forget about our new YouTube show as well. The Transatlantic Connection show is at youtube.com/thevagabondway. Episode 2, which has just come out, features a great singer-songwriter called Mal McWatt and live music manager and fan Graham Steele, so do check that out. Episode 3 will be out on Tuesday the 29th of September 2020. That's me, Steve Bonham and Kev Moore, The Long Road. We also have our curated playlists on Spotify. Just search for Transatlantic Connection and you should find them and find some music to enjoy. Okay, so time to get on with the show. First up is, we hope, a little bit of light relief, just a silly chat that Steve, Kev and I had a few weeks back talking about our instruments and the bits of gear that we've ended up purchasing over the years. Now, I should warn, this conversation reaches sort of Monty Python levels of absurdity around the quantity, the reasoning for purchasing and construction of all these instruments. So just brace yourselves. Okay, time to hand over to, myself. Here we are again, so the three of us, Steve Bonham, Kev Moore, and Chris the Bish Leiden. Steve's at home in Derbyshire, Kev at home in Spain, and I am at home in Manchester. Now, I've got something to tell you guys. I'm afraid it's time for an intervention.
Okay.
Because, as Steve very bravely admitted on the podcast a few months ago about his 6-string addiction, which I'm afraid sounds like it's doubled because he's accidentally got himself a 12-string guitar quite out of nowhere. Kev sounds like he's just ordered some accessories for his guitars which number in the triple figures, which we need to talk about. So, instruments, chaps, what is going on? You guys, between you, have more instruments than there are the population of some small countries. Tell what's going on.
Go on, Kev, you go first.
Oh, okay, oh dear.
I'll sit on my hands here, thinking...
As I gaze around my studio, I instantly go into double figures, which is most shameful. I play various instruments. I've just realised, of course, sat in front of me is my Roland workstation, so I also have a piano. Which is but yeah, I've got many different bass guitars, and for a long time I did manage to convince, perhaps not others, but myself, that everyone served a particularly different function. But it's getting harder to get away with that now. I have a 5-string Fernandez bass, I have a 5-string Music Man bass, I have a 4-string Music Man bass, I have a semi-acoustic Danelectro Longhorn, I have a solid Danelectro Longhorn with coated strings, so that's different. And I have an 8-string Gibson Les Paul bass, which doesn't actually exist. I can't even begin to tell you why I have one, but it's not a thing. Right. But I've got one.
Wow.
And then I've got my boutique guitars, my Wisniewski fretless, which was built by a hippie in North Carolina. And, that's an amazing piece of wood. It really is. And then I've got my studiously built Sorensen bass, which was made by a Danish luthier called Finn Sorensen. They're things of beauty, but they're the tools of my trade. What can I tell you? I need them. That's just the basses.
I have to challenge the tools of the trade, because I used to for years and years and years, I had a really good 6-string guitar, Fender Strat, and I had a fantastic Yamaha acoustic guitar. And that's all I needed for most 20 odd years,
Yeah.
But then I fell over the cliff, and I don't know what's happening now. I need help. All my instruments are kept upstairs, and I'm sitting downstairs. So my not upstairs instruments, from where I look, is a Sitten built by Filed, absolutely beautiful instrument.
Yes,
a lovely blue semi-acoustic guitar, an arch top by Avenue 5, a Maton Australian guitar, and if you went out into my hall, you'd fall over a mandolin and a bouzouki. So, and that's not starting upstairs. So, I don't know what happened really.
Weren't actually many guitars listed there, were there? That was all other.
No. The Maton was acoustic guitar, yeah.
Oh, right, okay, fine. So
Maton's
there's one guitar, but I know for a fact you have more than that guitar.
No, I have loads.
And one of the strange realisations, though, isn't it, is that, like now, I've got loads of acoustic guitars. This is your fault, Steve, that I have loads of acoustic guitars. But, the one that I play the most, and the one that's on all the recordings, is my old vintage 6-string, which was the cheapest guitar I ever bought.
Yeah.
I paid about 80 quid for it, and that came with a Gator case, which was worth 80 quid. So, but it's still my favourite guitar to play acoustically.
Yeah, and it sounds amazing. It's noisy as hell, but it's a fantastic tone. And that's the trouble. I mean, there's two things going on here. One is, like any form of addiction, it breeds self-justification. Unhinged self-justification. There's always a reason,
Always.
And I have to be honest and say, weirdly, plain lying. I mean, you feel you've got to tell someone why this thing's arrived, and it's always because it's unique or distinctive, or you're helping a mate out or whatever it was. You can't really own up the fact it's like my blood sugar levels would have collapsed if I hadn't bought it or anything like that, But the other thing about them, and probably the positive reason, is like your guitar, Kev. There's this kind of mythological. You can pay a lot of money for a guitar, and it can be very good. You can pay not very much money for a guitar; it can be complete crap. But out there, like the perfect Winchester or the nugget of gold, there is a guitar, because each one is unique, which is special, and it's like Dave Rawlins over in the States, who plays with Gillian Welch. I'm a fantastic guitarist and a really, really brilliant musician. He plays this guitar, this archback old guitar, which I think has no value at all for me. But the sound is astonishing, and you can hear it. It's totally distinctive. That's my reason. But there I go, justifying again. Justifying. It takes you over. Help!
But I think the point that you've made before in the past, Steve, is that actually you're a very physical songwriter, in as much as things don't always start with just one thing or the other. It's not just a lyric, or it's not just a chord pattern. They're often the same. They're often two sort of sides of the same coin for you, and they gradually merge and interact with each other. And you'll sit there with a little thing, and you'll come up with your fingers will accidentally make a shape, and you'll play something. You go, there's a new life form crawling out of this particular instrument, and that life form speaks to you about lyrics in a certain way, and you follow that up, and you follow your instincts. It's like a medieval incantation or whatever. It starts to draw itself out of the instrument.
It's alchemy. I remember having a conversation with my friend in the States, Manda Mosher, and she's a great Americana exponent and a great band, Calico band, and we were speaking about something you touched upon recently, Steve, as well. That our instrument, that there are songs within our instruments waiting to be released. And I really do feel that. It sounds crazy, but it's just true.
I think if you're into song, like we're all into writing, there's that feeling that, it's the grit that starts what you hope's going to create a pearl all the time, innit? You just need that thing. That sounds different. None of us write to formulas.
No.
Yeah.
I wish you did occasionally, Kev, because it would be much.
Right back at you, Steve. Back at you. I'd love there to be a song that didn't have a single half bar in
maverick
it.
anarchist like me ends up thinking, what the is going on here? I mean, I have wasted hours of my life trying to recover the C fifth that you play on Ballad of Dwayne and Billy Marie. But I think it's absolutely specific to the guitar you played on. It doesn't sound right on anything I've got.
I've written three songs in quick succession on my 12-string that I got recently. You know, it's...
Oh, so you've got a 12-string recently as well. It's spreading. Oh, my God.
Of course.
The media's got the wrong infection on their headlines here. It's 12-string. What am I going to get next? A 12-valve tuba? What's
a 12-valve tuba? Is there such a beast?
You guys have very bravely admitted your addictions, and it's and all support to you. I mean, if I could, I would have a lot more tubas than I do. Right now, I have one tuba, and I've owned that tuba for, I think, I've just passed its 20-year anniversary. I think I got it in the summer of 2000. So I've had it for 20 years, and it's probably the only tuba I'll ever own. If anything happened to that particular instrument, I would be absolutely inconsolable. It would be.
I understand.
It is part of me. And I don't know when that happened, because there was a time when it was a shiny new instrument and it felt very other. But now it is absolutely
there's a point when
integral.
they play in. Yeah, there is.
Yeah, and if anything happened to it, if it was stolen or if it got damaged or whatever, it would be very, very hard for me to recover from that.
I think I've just hit on one of the reasons of the addiction as well. By the way, chaps, when I was a young struggling musician, if I wanted a new guitar, which I always did, I would always have to sell one.
Yeah.
Get another one. And there's so many that I've regretted passing through my hands and not got back. And I'm in the process of sourcing a John Birch Rickenbacker bass again, like the first one I had, which will cost me an arm and a leg. But I just hate the young me that was stupid enough to sell it.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I'll admit to you guys right now that if I ever make a lot of money, and I can afford to spend casually, $6,000 on another tuba, I tell you, I'm doing it. I'll never. This one I've got, and I'm holding it behind me now. I'll always have this one. But if I had more money, I would have many more. Don't worry. I am basically the same. I have your problem.
I'm hearing here a basic personality type, which our tuba players are fundamentally monogamous. Guitarists are fundamentally promiscuous.
Oh no, I want loads of the buggers. I want loads of them. Steve Bonham's entry for this week's Songs in the Mix is steeped in thoughts about where we, The Long Road, have been artistically for the last year or so, or last few years, I suppose, and where we're heading next. So I'm going to hand right over to Steve.
Over the last few weeks, I've been looking and playing with the various songs that might end up on our recordings, which are scheduled for November. And all of a sudden, November doesn't seem very long away. Principally because Kev's going to be on the road, literally on the road, on his feet, walking along the Great Camino Trail towards the tomb and resting place of St. James, I believe. Though my old friend Jason Webster has suggested, and he's a great scholar, so presumably he should know that, in fact, the body buried there is a Moorish intellectual from a previous century. But, who am I to undo the hopes of millions of good people? Anyway, Kev's there, so that's October gone. So that, in my calculation, means we've got 2 weeks to kind of nail what we're going to do in November, and a lot riding on it, a lot of faith in what we're going to do in November. And what's interesting is we're doing that at the same time as we're wrapping up the American Wilderness Project. which is, 15 songs released over just over a year, exploring the moonshine myth and madness of America. And it's been interesting thinking about that ending and something beginning, because, what is the beginning and where we're going? I love the way we've done American Wilderness as a total of these 4 CDs over a period of time, almost like chapters of a book or episodes or of a series. My heart is in the idea of doing something similar again, but the question is what and how. And to that, I think I've got to circle back, or I've been circling back onto why I write songs in the first place. And then for me, ever since I was about 16, they're my go-to place when I'm trying to make sense of the world. And that early discovery that I made, no matter how dark the song, it always gives you hope, at least in the recognition of the shared feelings and emotions that you've got with at least one other person. Songwriting to me is a craft and a therapy, and I guess a way of expressing sometimes the things that I find impossible to express in any other way. I had so much learning on this journey of American Wilderness that, and so much rich experience that keeping down the road that we're on seems to be the most sensible thing and the most exciting thing. There's a number of reasons for that. I mean, one is the deep love I have for the whole business of America and my times there, which have been some of the most intense and profound experiences of my life ever since I was 21 years old and got a one-way ticket to Atlanta with the ambition of getting to California. But also, I think America and Americana, it's like the choice you make as an artist, whether you're going to paint in acrylic or charcoal or oil or watercolour or use clay or steel or iron or whatever you use. It's a marvellous material, rich in possibility. And then there's something about the American myth which makes it easier, for me anyway, to tackle the things I find important. The dilemmas of life seem to be drawn in very clear lines in the American dream. Should I stay or should I go? What is right or wrong? Where does my responsibility end? In this world, what is true? How does love happen? It's a fantastic, powerful canvas to work with. And I'm thinking maybe, I've been chatting with Chris and Kev about this, maybe our theme is the crossroads, down at the crossroads. The crossroads go back into the beginnings of time, wherever people had 2 ways to go, they were at a crossroads. They had a choice. They were making a decision that could change everything. It's the place where the devil was supposed to hang out, where they hung highwaymen in chains. In Ireland, it was where you could dance on the boundaries between one parish and another. And I don't think we're not writing a concept. This is not a concept idea. It's more like a reference point to know where we're going and what we're doing and what we're thinking about. It's early days, but I thought I'd share that with you now. And I think it could be another great journey. I'm very excited about it. The song I'm going to play this afternoon is very much in that spirit, and also kept going back to that idea of trying to capture the inarticulate feelings I sometimes have. Nailing the fragile, enigmatic moment of those times when you sense something powerful, but you can't say what it is, and you can't tie it to anything concrete. But this is a song about freedom called Something's Got to Change. Hear the tales from the woods, told by a man who's See the sign up in the sky, written by a girl who believed she could fly free. The lover and the thief, the riders on a range, the dead-eyed bulls are singing, something's gotta change. On a promissory note, the devil's in the detail, grabbed you by the throat. Chasing stars, without a rocket ship we won't get very far. The air up here is getting very thin. Go back home, they'll be wondering where you've been. The lover on a range, dead-eyed bulls are singing, something's gotta change. Freedom's just a freighted line on a promissory note, the devil's in the detail, grabbed you by the throat. Like a memory of rain falling in the desert on a dry and empty plain. Bring the mountains tumbling down to the dark black pool where all the chances drown. Lover and the thief, the riders on a range, dead-eyed boys are singing, something's gotta change. Freedom's just a faded line on a promissory note, the devil's in the details, grabbed you by the throat.
Hello again everyone and welcome to Kev's Cafe Corner. As I mentioned last week, I'm probably going to take a bit of a break from the actual cafes around the world at the moment and just invite you into my virtual one here. And I had an idea last week born out of the story that I told you about Amoeba Records in San Francisco. And I thought it was perhaps a good time to maybe do a short series on record shops around the world that I have frequented, because they're an important meeting place for music enthusiasts. They're certainly an important outlet for us musicians to sell our wares. And they're just magical places, really. And they were on their way out to a certain extent, but I think with the resurgence in the interest of vinyl, there's been a resurgence in record shops, perhaps not in a corporate way, which is perhaps a good thing, but more in a sort of cottage industry kind of way, and really opened and run by
music lovers, record enthusiasts, and they're the people to run them, really. And I think today I'm going to talk just briefly about a shop called White Rabbit Records in Shrewsbury. Now, I've never actually visited the shop itself, but I have purchased from there. They've got a very cool logo, by the way. It's kind of a play on the old Stax logo, but with like rabbit ears instead of, you know what I mean. Anyway, I was introduced to this shop on Facebook by a mutual friend, Marcus Galley, who's the son of Mel Galley from Trapeze, who's one of my favourite guitarists of all time. And it looked like they were a pretty decent outfit. So there was a discussion, I think, about some of the stock they had in store. And he was mentioning an album called Bumpers. Now, back in the early 70s, when I used to go and stay with family friends down in Bournemouth, I would peruse the second-hand shops and what have you. And I got hold of a copy of this album called Bumpers. It's very distinctive, sort of pop art, yellow, with a pair of sort of cartoon sneakers on the front, bumpers as they were called then, in yellow and red. And it's an Island compilation double vinyl album. And I had this in my collection as a young teenager for a long time, and it introduced me to so many artists. Some I was familiar with, such as Free, Cat Stevens, Traffic. But it was the very first place I heard one of my heroes, now I'm happy to call a friend, Jess Roden, with a band called Bronco. It also had some early Jethro Tull, Mott the Hoople, pre-hits, Dave Mason, Jimmy Cliff, Fotheringay. It was just an absolute cornucopia of superb music, as you'd expect from the Island label. And I spoke to the guy at White Rabbit Records, and he indeed had a copy of this double album on vinyl. Mine had gone missing in the mists of time years ago. And he assured me it was in really good condition, which, you know, they usually always do. But it arrived at my house in Spain, and it really was in superb condition. It's like new. And to have that back in my possession, it's hard to describe the emotions you feel. There's something different about handling a vinyl album and the large sleeve, the gatefold sleeve. As you open this one, for example, there's a fabulous picture collage of all the bands and all the information, and you sit and read it and play the albums. It's a magical thing. And I felt in that moment that the shop had given me back something of my youth, which is beyond compare, really. So I urge you to keep your local record shops alive. There are some beautiful treasures waiting to be discovered. And indeed, if you're anywhere near Shrewsbury, check out White Rabbit Records, because they've got some beautiful stuff in there. So that's it for this week, listeners. Join me next week in my virtual cafe, and we'll talk about another record shop and a little treasure that I discovered there. Take care.
It will be a brave new world out there once all this COVID stuff settles down. Perhaps people will be a little clearer as to what they truly value and how that comes about. Artists being sort of sacrificed on the altar of Spotify, meaning that local record stores, suffer, as do the artists, as the royalties from Spotify for most are, laughable. The system has to change. I would love to see a really strong ecosystem of record stores that nurture great connections with audiences and artists. Similar to how, independent cinemas have a different experience with perhaps smaller independent films compared to, the big multinational cinema chains and their relationship to blockbuster films. We're always going to have the Taylor Swifts and the Lady Gagas and the K-pop sensations. Ultimately, perhaps this is the cynic in me talking, but I think it's true. They make big bucks for somebody somewhere along the line. Much like the Hollywood blockbuster system. Hollywood blockbuster might cost $100 million to make, but they make $500 million back. Some would say that's just economics. But we do need the small fish as well. The artisans, the handcrafters, real stories with real connections. I'm certain that independent record stores, physical and virtual, will be vital to this future looming, hopefully, ecosystem. This week on the Bishop's Daily Bread, I'm going to bring the baking out from behind the allegorical curtain, as I have done on a few occasions in the past, and sort of just lay things bare. The metaphor of my baking adventures and misadventures is often just that, a metaphor. Perhaps the Daily Bread theme is really about doing the things daily, or regularly at least, that keep your spirit alive, that keep you ticking over, that keep the lights on in your brain. One of the things I've missed terribly during this COVID-19 period has been my prison work. I think I've mentioned it here in passing in the past, but recently I was a guest on my friend Tom's podcast. The podcast is called Performative. Tom Morgan and his pal Chris Pott started this podcast during lockdown and have covered a range of arts topics so far, speaking to various people with different roles in the industry. Have a look for the podcast yourself. Facebook and Twitter, their username is PerformativePod, all one word. On Instagram, they are Performative_pod. Check it out. It's got some really great guests on it, if I do say so myself, and some really interesting topics discussed. Anyway, so Tom and Chris asked me about my prison work, and little did they know, if someone gives me even a millimetre to talk about this topic, I will take a mile quite happily. So the episode went out on the 16th of September 2020, so check it out to hear me talk about many different sides of my prison work, the challenges, some of the people me and my colleague have met over the years, how it works on a practical level. But I suppose the thing that doing that podcast has got me thinking about, and it chimes with much thinking and planning being done throughout lockdown, is working out what you really want to do with your time on this planet, how you help others, level up the world, how you can keep yourself entertained and fulfilled, and how you can manage to do all that whilst not burning out and being able to pay the rent. And for me, actually, my twice weekly sessions in Thorncross Prison for the last 15 years or so, well, up until March, thanks COVID, they were integral to my well-being, funnily enough. Part of me is totally wired to working out how to best help the men we meet in the course of that project. The overarching conclusion I came to in the course of the Performative podcast recording, having not been running a prison session for 6 months and then being asked about it and my brain really, really wanting to talk about and think about it, roll around in that particular puddle like a gleeful 3-year-old, was that the things that the arts can do in all its forms is bring hope. Hope for prisoners who will get out of prison and want to be a productive part of society, and we need them to be a productive part of society. Hope for artists trying to work out how to express their art, through music, theatre, visual art, dance, whatever it is. I think hope is the key. Hope that for marginalised groups of people, it gets better. Together we can make it better. Hope for those in need of help, that people care. Kindness is everywhere, despite what a lot of media focuses on. Hope for those who are currently in the dark, for whatever reason, a bad day, a rough week, a poor deal of the cards, a troubled few years in their life, that light can be found at the end of the tunnel, and the arts can be the light, or the arts can be what strengthens that light, gives it power to grow and get brighter. Hope is what humanity always needs to move forward, and we have to work together to make sure that hope is a reality for everyone. Now, to crash back to earth with some baking news, at about 10 a.m. this morning, I put the dough together for a loaf of granary bread and put it in a bowl on the windowsill to prove for an hour. And now it's approximately 8 hours later. Oops, completely forgot about it. And I fear the downstairs of my flat will once and truly have been taken over by that dough monster from that film Sleeper. I'd better grab my broom and start to tackle the beast. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening, wherever in the world you are. Subscribe to the podcast. We're on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify. The next episode will be out next Friday. Don't forget to join us on YouTube for the Transatlantic Connection show and become part of the Transatlantic Connection movement. Head to youtube.com/thevagabondway. You can find us on Facebook as well, The Vagabond Way, Steve Bonham on the Long Road, just look for that. All of our music's on Spotify and Apple Music, go and have a listen. Give us a follow. If you like what you hear, share it with your pals who might like it as well. We're on Patreon at patreon.com/thevagabondway. Big thank you to our Patreons and a special shout out to Orla Flynn, James Lydon, Yvette Lydon and Trish Taylor. Thank you for your support. Patreon is a great platform that makes it super easy for anyone out there, you, to support content that you love on a monthly basis. It gives you direct access to the people creating the stuff you love, us, hopefully, and you get to play an integral part in shaping the direction of the things that we make. So, become a vagabonder. That's our name for our supporters on Patreon, to help us create live performances, books and short stories, this weekly podcast, our YouTube show, and some new things we are cooking up. As a vagabonder, you can get the recordings and books we make for free, receive exclusive Patreon-only merchandise in the post, get regular behind-the-scenes updates from us, unlock access to exclusive live-stream performances and Q&As, and lots more. You can help us create something different, something that entertains, and something that inspires others. So, join us on the journey and release the vagabond within. Patreon.com/thevagabondway. Thank you once again, brave adventurers, vagabonds and explorers, for joining us on The Vagabond Way. Remember, the world isn't beige, it's authentic, it's rich and it's real. Embrace every last bit of it. Until next time, the journey goes ever on with The Long Road. Bye for now.